A man was hunting in the frozen land of Alaska when he suddenly noticed that a herd of deer nearby seemed to have seen something terrifying. The cries of the deer echoed throughout the valley, leaving the hunter unable to react. The herd of deer panicked and rushed towards the cliff in unison. This seemed to signal an impending disaster. This scene shocked the hunter. As the sun slowly set, Alaska entered the endless night. At this time, researchers from all over the world were still at the Saran Arctic station. As usual, they were analyzing data. However, while Gideon was live streaming his daily life, suddenly his colleague Clark next to him began to convulse. A few days later, a supply worker named Bill brought a truckload of supplies to the research station. He stood at the door and called out for a long time, but no one answered. Reluctantly, he dragged his things into the research room to find someone to sign, but he found that no one was there. While he was confused, a dark shadow suddenly passed in front of him. Then, Bill went into the kitchen to check the situation. He accidentally touched the key ring on the table. He quickly bent down to pick it up but found a human tongue lying on the floor. Not long after, Chief Danvers and her colleagues went to the research station to investigate. The delivery person who came this morning found the research station anti-slip and reported it. The last time they contacted the town was a week ago. They called to request more supplies. The person in charge of contacting their family was Lulu, but the scientists came from all over the world, so it would take some time. This Saran research station has been operating for 18 years, mainly to study Arctic geology and biology, as well as the effects of climate change. They live here alone like monks for a year. They dig up the ice to find the source of life. Danvers enters the lab. She turns around and sees, "We're all dead," written on the whiteboard. Peter finds a couple of employee phones, but they're dead. Who doesn't have a phone? There's no signal outside. There's nothing outside. Danvers tells Peter to check the phone's call log. Then she calls for help and has a helicopter search the area. But Hank thinks the scientists might just be out exploring, so he suggests waiting a little longer. But Danvers finds a cold cut on the table and a sandwich that looks fresh, but the mayonnaise inside has turned to mush. It takes 2 days for mayonnaise to get like that. Processed meat can last a long time. This is the lesson of forgetting a lunchbox in the car for 2 days. Danvers said he wasn't the type to make sandwiches for his kids, was he? And the clothes in the washing machine smelled. It meant these people had been missing for more than 48 hours. It had been 2 days, and the tongues were starting to change color. Peter said it probably wasn't human, but Danvers said it was definitely human, because it was a repeated mark from regular behavior. It turned out they had found the frozen body of a native woman a year earlier. Her tongue had similar marks. They had then sent a sample of the tongue to the Antwerp lab for chemical analysis. Danvers returned to the police station after leaving the research station and met Sergeant Navarro. Because Navarro had been investigating the case involving the death of a native woman named Annie, but for some reason, Navarro had been transferred elsewhere. This time Navarro came to ask Danvers to reopen the investigation of Annie's murder. Danvers said that Annie had been dead for 6 years and that the tongue could not be hers. It was the tongue of an Inupiaq woman. After saying that, Navarro angrily left the office and went to the mine to meet Annie's brother, Ryan. Navarro asked Ryan if Annie had ever mentioned the Saran research station. It turned out that Annie had always been strongly against the mine, causing everything to be in chaos. Navarro suspected that the people in the mine wanted to harm Annie. Ryan had told Annie that if she forced the mine to close, she would cut off the livelihood of the people of Ennis. But Annie still did not listen. Ryan had argued with Annie about this. During the year before Annie was killed, they hardly spoke. Danvers thought that Annie's death might be related to the 8 scientists who went missing at the research station. So Annie decided to reopen the case of Annie's mysterious death 6 years ago. Danvers discovered in Annie's file that she had been stabbed 32 times by an unknown sharp object and that the wound was star-shaped, but the murder weapon was never found. Annie's tongue was also cut out, but they couldn't find it either. At that time, the police officer Navarro was the first to arrive at the scene, so she was very obsessed with this case. She couldn't bear to see women hurt. Even though she had no clue, she still didn't give up. Later, Danvers took the documents of the 8 missing scientists at the research station and Annie's case 6 years ago and carefully compared them. Danvers found that the fur coat Annie had worn was exactly like a scientist's coat, but Annie's coat had a triangular cut, while the scientist's coat had a smiley face on the left sleeve. Are these 8 missing scientists really related to Annie's death 6 years ago? Meanwhile, an old woman named Rose lives alone in the mountains. While washing dishes in the kitchen, she discovers a mysterious man staring from outside the window. Rose seems to recognize this man. He doesn't say anything but leads her to an empty lot and does a strange dance. Then he points to a nearby empty lot. Soon after, Danvers and Navarro arrive by helicopter. Navarro asks Rose how she found them. Rose replies that Travis led her here. But the strange thing is that Travis died many years ago. This shocks Navarro quite a bit, but she doesn't have time to think too much. Navarro sees several scientists scientists buried under the ice. From their pained expressions, it seems like they saw something scary before they died. 8 scientists mysteriously disappeared at the Saran Arctic Research Station. A few days later, the police found them buried under ice, not far away. Each of them was naked, and their corneas were burned. Even their eardrums were completely ruptured. It seemed that they had seen something horrifying before they died. However, what was even more strange was that on the forehead of one of the victims was a strange spiral. These strange details showed that this case was definitely not simple. At this time, a police officer came with an electric saw to cut the ice, but was immediately stopped by Danvers. She said that this was a crime scene, so at least they should pretend to be professional. Surprisingly, Officer Winston accidentally broke the victim's arm. Immediately after that, something terrible happened. A scientist suddenly came back to life. Navarro was a state police officer, so she could not participate in the investigation of this case. Rose tells Navarro to leave this case to someone else, but Navarro thinks it's related to Annie's. After Rose leaves, Navarro finds several pairs of shoes neatly arranged on the floor. Perhaps the scientists encountered something supernatural. They then take the living scientist to the town hospital. Meanwhile, Navarro goes to Rose's house. It turns out Travis is Rose's husband, but Travis died of leukemia a few years ago. Navarro asks when Rose started seeing Travis. Rose says that since meeting Travis, she's been able to see the dead. She thinks that the dead come to her because they miss her, and that people come to tell her things. When Rose leaves, she asks Navarro if she saw the strange symbol on the victim's forehead. Navarro says she saw it years ago. It's something ancient, maybe even older than the ice. They plan to take the frozen bodies to the ice rink at the mine to thaw. Not long after, the bodies were brought to the ice rink. When Peter removed the plastic covering, he found that the scientists had teeth marks on their hands. It looked like they had bitten their own hands. Danvers told Peter to check the autopsy reports in the area to see if there were any similar cases. There were 5 heads and 9 feet at the scene. The rest were still in the ice. Peter didn't understand why they were rushing around like they were running from some monster, but there was no monster. Hypothermia can cause hallucinations. They had panicked and frozen to death. Navarro then came to the ice rink and held a drawing with a strange spiral shape and showed it to Danvers. This was Annie's tattoo. One of the victims had the same shape on his forehead. It was the same case, so they could cooperate in Annie's investigation, but Danvers didn't want to cooperate with Navarro and sent her away. Peter used facial recognition to unlock a scientist's phone. They got a fingerprint analysis report from the lab. A fingerprint was found on a shoe, but there was no match. Sudden drops in pressure would rupture eardrums, damaging soft tissue. They also knew hypothermia could cause hallucinations and lead to irrational behavior. That would explain the self-inflicted wounds. But Danvers couldn't understand why they would take time off work to run out into the snow. Peter guessed it could be a gas leak, but the research station had no gas, only electricity. Could it be that a polar bear had invaded the research station and caused the scientists to panic and run away? But why would they take off their clothes? Severe hypothermia would feel hot and take off their clothes. So who drew the spiral on the victim's forehead? Was it before they crawled out or after? If it was before, it could have been a prank or a game. But what if it was after? That meant there were other people out there, because no one would draw pictures on their foreheads when they were about to die of cold. But what was even stranger was that they only found 5 pairs of pants and 3 shoes missing. That didn't match the number of bodies. Why were the clothes exposed? How scared did someone have to be to run out into the snow without shoes? It could have been the killer's plan. But why would the killer fold clothes? Maybe he was mocking the victims. Peter unlocked the scientist's phone and found a video from the day they were murdered. The video was taken on the 17th. Finally, Danvers and Peter split up to meet the station's supply and cleanup staff. They investigated the situation before the scientists disappeared, but from their stories, there were no useful clues. At this time, Navarro learned from Annie's former colleague that the person in the photo was definitely Clark. 7 years ago, Clark bought a trailer from his cousin and used it as a date spot with Annie. At this time, Navarro learned that Annie and Clark were a couple and both had the same spiral shape. The analysis showed that the tongue found at the research station belonged to Annie. So, the two decided to cooperate in investigating the 2 cases to find the truth. Each person solved their own part. After that, Navarro and Danvers found the trailer that had been left there for many years, according to the location provided. On the table, they found Annie's phone. There was also a large spiral on the roof. At this time, Peter called to inform them that there was a new discovery at the skating rink. After thawing the bodies, they found only 6 bodies, and not the body of scientist Clark. Maybe he's still alive somewhere out there. After thawing the bodies, the police discovered that Clark wasn't among them. This suggested that he might still be alive. Hank immediately mobilized the entire police force and local residents to search the town for the suspect Clark. Hank described the suspect's appearance and clothing. Clark had been on the run for at least 48 hours, so they needed to act act quickly, so they split into several groups to search. Meanwhile, Peter moved all of Clark's belongings from the research station to the evidence room at the police station. Danvers took Annie's phone that they found in the car and asked Peter to figure out how to unlock it. Actually, Peter always had a question for Danvers. Peter didn't understand why their relationship became strained after Danvers's last cooperation with Navarro. Danvers finally had to tell Peter the truth, that it was a case of a murderer doing something stupid after he killed someone. William was a scumbag, armed with robberies and injuries. He was a regular at prison. Danvers said that after William was released from prison, he had a 24-year-old girlfriend. He beat her every day. In the end, he broke her arm, broke her jaw, and had to be hospitalized twice. The police also came to his house many times, but the girl never reported the crime. She always said the same things to protect him, so the police were helpless. Until one day they received a call. Danvers and Navarro quickly arrived at the scene after receiving the news, but they were still one step too late. William killed the girl and then did something stupid. Navarro could not let go because she believed she could have prevented this. Danvers said that this was of course her fault. The two had a quarrel because of this. Navarro was eventually transferred to another place. At this time, Navarro searched near the research station for a long time but found nothing. In frustration, she picked up an orange and threw it forward. But something strange happened. The orange she had just thrown rolled back to her feet. There was a voice calling for help. She looked around but saw no one. Suddenly, the phone rang. Danvers told Navarro to go to the police station. In front of her was a pile of Clark's evidence. Just looking at it was dangerous enough. The two of them checked for a while, but still found nothing suspicious. At that time, Danvers saw a photo of Clark and Annie. It turned out that they'd had a secret relationship for 7 years, so no one had seen them together. Danvers noticed that the other photos were all selfies, but this photo was a candid photo. This showed that someone was with them at the time. They looked through all the candid photos. One photo with a blue hair dye stain immediately caught their attention. Then they went to the barber shop in town. They found the owner, Susan, to ask her about it. It turned out that she knew Clark and knew about his relationship with Annie, but she had not told the police about it before. Susan said that a few years ago, she went to Saran to cut the hair of the scientists. Annie had accompanied Susan to the research station. Something had happened that day. Annie and Clark got along well and talked all night. Annie also showed Clark her tattoo. He looked at her without blinking. Navarro took out his phone and asked Susan if she knew what it meant. Susan said Annie had dreamed about it many times, but since Annie got it, the dreams had stopped. Navarro asked Susan if Clark had any violent tendencies. Susan replied that Clark was a little strange, but Clark was very infatuated with Annie. After dating for a while, Annie began to change. She did not want others to know that they were dating. Susan was very scared after Annie was murdered because Susan had also dated an engineer named Oliver at Saran Station, but there was no one named Oliver in the station's records. Susan said that Oliver had left before Annie's accident. They asked Susan if she knew where to find Oliver. Susan said that the last time she heard him, he was on the ice. Maybe he was hunting. He probably did not want anyone to find him. After Susan discovered Annie's body, she also called the police. Although Susan did not reveal her identity, she told Hank about Clark. So why did Hank hide this important clue? Navarro thought that maybe the mine had interfered. Annie was always against the mine, so she was murdered. The police tried to stop the case, but Danvers didn't think so. She said that half the town worked in the mine. Without the mine, the town wouldn't exist. Half the population wanted Annie to keep quiet. Back at the ice rink, Navarro angrily asked Hank about hiding clues in the case. Hank replied that Annie slept with half town. Should they arrest everyone who spent the night with her? Navarro was about to hit Hank. Danvers saw this and quickly pulled Navarro away. Danvers told Navarro to calm down. Not long after, Dr. Vince arrived. After carefully observing the scene, he realized that the scientists didn't die from freezing, but were already dead before freezing. He had seen reindeer die of fear. They panicked and ran away before dying. And these scientists looked the same. Danvers asked if they could do a preliminary autopsy on the bodies, but he was only a veterinarian. Furthermore, this is a serious violation of the law. They are waiting for the forensics to arrive tomorrow to confirm. Navarro then came to the ice rink and said that she found Oliver at the North Shore homeless shelter. Danvers and Navarro immediately drove there, but the two stood at the door and knocked for a long time without anyone answering. Hearing the sound of the generator inside, they pushed the door open and entered. Oliver warned them that if they did not get a search warrant, he would shoot them in the head with a shotgun. They said that his colleague had died on the ice, and the exact circumstances were unknown. When Oliver heard that Lance was still being treated, he suddenly became angry. Then Oliver used a shotgun to chase the two out of the house and told them never to come back here. When the two police drivers returned to the police station, they received a call from the hospital saying that Lance had woken up from his coma. Danvers and Navarro rushed to the hospital. The doctor said that Lance was very agitated and occasionally fell into a coma. Danvers asked Lance about what happened on the ice that night, but Lance said strange things. Before Lance could say anything, he fell into a coma again. At this time, there was a group of hunters arguing outside. Danvers had to run out to the lobby and join the guards to control the hunters. Meanwhile, Navarro stayed in the room with Lance. Suddenly, Lance sat up in bed and said something very strange to Navarro. "Hello, Evangeline. Your mother says hello. Your mother is waiting for you outside the door." After a seizure, Lance fell into a coma again. Navarro was completely confused. At this time, Peter had also unlocked Annie's phone. That night, Danvers lay in bed and kept thinking about this incident. She picked up her phone and played the video again to study it more closely, and she discovered something. From the video image, it looked like a fossil of a large animal. On the way to the ice rink, Danvers received a call from Peter. He said that Captain Connor wanted to move the bodies to Ancora. He asked her to come immediately. While Danvers was on her way, she saw Navarro's sister, Julia, walking alone on the street, naked. Danvers quickly took a coat and put it on Julia. Danvers then took Julia to the police station and left Navarro to take care of her sister. In order to better treat Julia, Navarro took her to a mental health center. But what she didn't expect was that this would be their last meeting. At the same time, Connor came to Danvers's office and said that he didn't come to fight over the case, but because there were people protesting at the mine. This turned into a fight at the hospital. There are also 6 bodies at the ice rink, and the main witness is missing. Connor wants to help Danvers control the situation. Peter finds out that there is a similar case of injuries to scientists at the research station. This person is named Otis, a German. He has no employment records, no bank account, no credit card, no registered address in the past 8 years. But he has a long criminal record. 2 months ago, he was arrested by another gang and disappeared. Now everyone is looking for Clark, so there is no one free to look for Otis. Meanwhile, Navarro goes near the site where Annie was murdered, but she does not find the ice cave. That suggests Annie was murdered elsewhere. Annie was then left near the town. Danvers suspects that the killer wants to send a message that this is a warning. Later, Danvers and Navarro go to geologist Adam to ask him to help analyze what kind of animal the fossil in the video is. After Adam looked closely, he realized that these were whale bones, maybe a prehistoric Bohuska whale. They asked how to find this ice cave. Adam said that the Brook Mountains had a complete ice cave system, but it was very dangerous. There had been some accidents many years ago, so it was closed. Navarro asked for the specific address. Adam said that they could get a map to find the way, but it would take a while. But even with a map, they would need a professional guide to get in because there were many water channels in the cave. Just one wrong step and they would fall into the abyss. Adam said that there was another way, which was to find a map maker. Adam said that person was Hess. Danvers was a little surprised because that person had the same injuries as the scientists at Sauron. At the same time, Julia was sitting by the bed, combing her hair, getting ready for bed, when something strange happened. An orange rolled out from under the bed, causing Julia to panic a little. Julia slowly bent down and saw Annie, who had died long ago. Not long after, Julia went to the beach alone to make the last phone call to her sister. She said, "I love you." Then Julia took off her clothes, folded them neatly on the ground, and walked naked into the middle of the icy sea. After Danvers got home from work, she continued to study Annie's video and compared it with the video the scientists shot before the accident. She found that the ending of the 2 videos was the same. Danvers quickly informed Navarro of this news. Before, Danvers thought the video was faulty, but in fact, the power supply was cut off. But how could there be electricity in the ice cave? Danvers suddenly remembered the equipment engineer Oliver. Only he at the research station had the right to use the emergency generator. Then Navarro and Peter went to Oliver's house. They found the house full of dust. It seemed that no one had lived in it for a long time, but they both saw that mysterious spiral on the floor. Oliver left 2 days ago. The lead was interrupted again, leaving Danvers at a dead end. Navarro had just returned to the police station when she received a call from the Alaska Coast Guard saying her sister had done something stupid. Navarro went to the hospital and immediately angrily asked the doctor why she let a mental patient out alone. This was not a detention center, but a voluntary facility. Out of anger, she started a fight with the others. Navarro was soon beaten to the ground and could not get up. Meanwhile, Danvers was driving home when she almost hit a polar bear that was crossing the road. She braked hard and the car crashed into a snowdrift on the side of the road. The bear looked at her for a moment, then turned and walked away. Navarro had seen this bear in town before. That night, Danvers dreams of her dead son. A sudden doorbell wakes her. Navarro says she found a spiral-shaped stone at Oliver's house yesterday. Navarro feels her pocket and realizes she dropped it last night. Navarro sees the teddy bear on the floor and remembers the scene she saw when she was in a coma a few days ago. Navarro tells Danvers about her sister's stupidity last night. Navarro says her sister has been diagnosed with bipolar disorder and schizophrenia. The disease took her mother and sister, and she fears fears she will be next. Danvers tells Navarro not to believe in superstitions. At this moment, Danvers receives a call from Peter. He says someone saw Clark near the ship. The two quickly get in a police car and go there. As soon as they step inside the ship, they see a large spiral on the wall. Suddenly, they hear footsteps above. The two immediately follow. Navarro was drawn into a mysterious force and saw her sister's body. On the other side, Danvers found Clark standing in the corner. Danvers asked Clark to take off his hat, but it wasn't Clark, it was the cartographer, Otis. Danvers asked who gave Otis the coat. Was it Clark? Otis huddled in the corner and shivered. He seemed afraid of something. At this moment, Navarro followed the footsteps and came to a Christmas tree. She felt a little betrayed. When she was about to turn away, suddenly someone stood behind her. Danvers went to the lowest part of the ship and saw Navarro sitting motionless in front of the Christmas tree. Navarro's eardrums were also ruptured. Danvers had found Otis, the cave cartographer, earlier. She then took him to the town hospital. Danvers asked if Otis knew Clark before. Otis replied that he knew about the Salal research, but he didn't know anyone there. Danvers asked what happened the day he was injured. Otis said it happened 30 years ago. At that time, the ice collapsed. Many people were trapped inside. They tried to get out and call for help, but there was a blizzard and something was roaring outside. Others followed the sound. He was about to follow, but suddenly his mind went blank. Then he passed out. When he woke up, he was lying on the sick forest. Then Danvers showed Otis a map of the cave system and asked him to show him the entrance to the cave. Otis pointed to a spot and said it was very dangerous. She couldn't go alone because the ice there was as thin as glass. The cave could easily collapse. Danvers asked Otis to lead them to the cave. Otis said he would show them the way with a few packages of drugs. Danvers firmly refused Otis's request. Not long after, Danvers and Navarro arrived at the entrance to the cave, but they found that the entrance had been blocked with explosives. They thought they had lost another important clue. At the same time, hundreds of environmentalists gathered in front of the mine gate to protest. They demanded the immediate closure of the mine. Therefore, the mine owner had to hire a large number of fully equipped security guards and many police officers to maintain order. At the scene, Navarro saw Annie's figure among the crowd, but in the blink of an eye, Annie had disappeared. Navarro was stunned and did not understand what was happening when suddenly a protester threw an ink bottle at her head. A nearby guard saw this and immediately grabbed the protester's hair. She called Sully for help, but Sully turned away. When the guard was about to continue beating the girl, Navarro immediately pushed him away. That girl was none other than Leah, Danvers' daughter. At this time, Danvers received a call from Sheriff Connor asking her to come to the mining company. As Danvers was about to leave, Peter brought good news. He found in the tax documents that the company that funded the research station was the Silver Sky Mining Company. The mine had funded the Salal research station. The research station had helped them reduce their pollution data. Danvers quickly went to Silver Sky. The chief of staff connected Danvers that this was not a murder case. Connor gave Danvers the results of the forensic examination and said that this was a natural disaster. A 300 km/h avalanche could have killed anyone. The scientists had probably gone out to watch the sunset before dark. They had hallucinated from hypothermia, which had damaged their ears and damaged their soft tissues. This was a common sign of freezing. However, Danvers did not believe that they had died of cold. Kate did not want to argue further. Kate immediately got up and left. Danvers took out the evidence that the mine funded the research at Salal. But Kate was not surprised because she thought it was normal. They fund important research projects. Salal is located locally. Their work is important, but they are the ones who confirm the pollution levels of companies. Isn't that a conflict of interest? Danvers tells Connor that Annie was killed in the ice cave. She still believes that the two cases are related and they are close to finding out. But Connor brings up the William abuse case that Danvers and Navarro dealt with 3 years ago. Did William really do something stupid or not? Elsewhere, Kate meets Hank and tells him that Danvers is investigating the place where Annie was killed. Kate wants Hank to deal with Otis. Only then will Danvers not find the ice cave. Hank says he helped them before and they promised to make him sheriff, but they broke their promise. Kate explained that the bureaucracy was too complicated for her to handle, but this time was different. Otis was just a drug addict. If he disappeared, no one would know. Kate promised that once Hank was done, he would get a large sum of money and the position of sheriff. Navarro was doing laundry at the store when her boyfriend brought an old man in. The old man said that the symbol was a warning to hunters, places where ice could swallow people, underground ice caves. Sometimes when they were kids, they would break the ice to get into the caves under the ice. They were caught and scolded by their grandmother. She said the darkness would catch them. Navarro immediately understood something, so she went to the police station to inform Danvers. Navarro said they just had to find the highest point on the map and they could get into the ice caves. But Danvers said the investigation was in. The victims died from natural disasters. Connor knew that 3 years ago, they shot William's abuser brother and wanted to make it look like he did something stupid. Danvers said that there were things that did not need to be investigated. Danvers told Navarro to stop and stop. It was all over. Navarro then went to the beach and tapped on the hard ice. Then she dropped her sister's bones into the sea. When she stood up to leave, she heard a strange sound. Someone called her name. She slowly followed the call, and then she was in another world. She was in a daze when the ice under her feet suddenly cracked. Rose quickly told Navarro to lie down. Thanks to Rose's help, Navarro was saved. Rose asked why Navarro walked into the sea like that. At the same time, Danvers went to see Leah in the bathtub. Danvers asked why Leah went to the mine to protest. Leah explained that the reason she joined the protest was because in the past 3 months, many people had died in the town without finding the cause and their bodies, so it made many people angry. Danvers realized she was wrong. She went to the evidence room to get a package of drugs. Then Danvers went to the hospital to find Otis, who was a heavy drug user. She asked him to take her to the ice cave. At first, he didn't want to take her there, until she gave him a package of flour. Otis agreed to take her to the ice cave. While Navarro was on a date, Danvers called her home. Otis showed Danvers the highest point on the map. Danvers gave Otis a package of drugs to use. She even reminded him to use less. While she was studying the map carefully, the doorbell rang. Danvers thought it was Navarro, so she opened the door. But it was Hank. Hank said Connor told him to come and arrest the drug addict Otis. Danvers asked how Hank knew Otis was here. Hank said he'd guessed Otis was at Danvers's house. Hank just came to ask where Otis was. Danvers said she would call Connor, but Hank grabbed Danvers' phone and threw it aside. At that time, Otis had just finished using drugs and came out of the bathroom. Danvers advised Hank not to do anything stupid. When Otis tried to run away, Hank shot and killed him. Peter heard the gunshot and ran over. Peter pointed the gun at Hank. Hank told Peter to put the gun down and help him carry the body to the truck. When Han tried to shoot Danvers, Peter shot and killed his father. Then, Navarro arrived. Danvers wanted to call Connor, but Navarro stopped him. Navarro said that if Connor was involved, Connor would definitely not forgive them. They should pretend that this never happened and Hank never came here. Hank shot and killed Otis and left the body. But when Hank disposed of the body, he had an accident. Navarro thought that someone had ordered Hank to kill Otis to prevent them from finding out where Annie was. They were only a little bit closer to knowing the truth. So Navarro decided that the most important thing now was to immediately go find the ice cave. Peter would stay and deal with the aftermath. Before leaving, Navarro told Peter to clean up the scene and bring Hank and Otis's bodies to Rose. After that, the two of them braved the snowstorm to find the ice cave. Danvers and Navarro went through the snowstorm to the location that Otis had directed. They finally found the ice cave. After Navarro checked that it was safe, the two of them went inside. But as they went deeper, Navarro heard Annie's voice calling her. Then, the two of them continued through the narrow path. Soon they reached the end of the ice cave. They found that it was blocked. Danvers wanted to go back, but Navarro believed that Annie was there. When the two of them argued fiercely, Navarro suddenly fell into an ice cave below. Danvers also fell. When they thought they were about to be trapped here, Clark suddenly appeared in front of them. The two of them hurriedly chased after him, but when they got there, they were surprised to find a secret laboratory. The two of them searched the room, but found no trace of Clark. Danvers looks up and sees the same fossil as the one in Annie's video on the ceiling. It seems that this is where Annie was killed. Danvers removes the drill bit from the drill and discovers that this drill bit is Annie's murder weapon. Navarro notices that the rack in the room has moved. The two quickly move the rack and they discover a passage hundreds of meters deep. They slowly climb the stairs. When they open the door, they are surprised to see that this passage leads straight to the Salal Arctic Research Station. Danvers and Navarro split up to find Clark. When Danvers finds the cold room, Clark locks the door from the outside. When Navarro hears the noise, she rushes over. Clark suddenly uses a fire extinguisher to hit Navarro. Danvers finds an iron bar and uses all her strength to break the security glass door. When Danvers arrives, Navarro has beaten Clark almost unconscious. Danvers quickly stops Navarro because they need to keep him alive. The two tied Clark to a chair to force him to tell the truth. Navarro took out his phone to show Clark the video of Annie recording her last moments, but he still refused to cooperate. To face this bastard, Navarro had no choice but to put on headphones and play back Annie's desperate screams before she died. Finally, Clark confessed the truth. It turned out that scientists at the Salal Arctic Research Station were searching for microbial DNA in the permafrost. They believed that these microorganisms could save the world. The reason they were successful was because the pollution from the mine softened the ice, minimizing the damage when extracting DNA and helping to speed up the research. To speed up the research, they also required the mine to release more pollutants. The more polluted the water, the more toxic the soil would absorb, making the permafrost suitable for research. Annie was curious about the underground research, so she secretly sneaked into the lab. At first, Clark thought Annie was just looking for financial evidence, but she discovered their true goal. Annie had destroyed all their their research results. When Clark heard Annie's scream, he quickly went to the lab. Clark saw Len using a drill to stab Annie. Clark quickly pulled Len away, but Len lost control. Clark tried to check Annie's injury, but Annie picked up the tool and hit Clark hard on the head. She stood up in the weapon area, but other scientists heard and ran over to restrain her. Clark had to watch his colleague end his girlfriend's life. He changed his shirt and wiped the blood from her face. Navarro asked who cut Annie's tongue. Clark said that they had asked the mine's people to help move Annie's body. Because the mine still needed them to continue falsifying data, they sent a police officer to handle it. Clark suspected that the policeman had cut out Annie's tongue to warn others. That policeman was hanged. Now Annie's death was clear. Danvers asked Clark about the deaths of his colleagues. Clark assumed that Annie had killed them because he often saw her shadow and heard her voice. Immediately when he saw Annie in the lab, Clark was so scared that he lost control. Clark quickly opened the floor hatch and escaped to the underground lab. No matter how his colleagues outside called for help, he did not open the door. Hearing his colleagues screaming outside, he held the door handle tightly. Then he stayed there for several days until he was hungry and climbed up. Then Clark went to Otis to ask how to escape Annie's obsession. Otis said that it had nothing to do with Annie because when he was injured, Annie was not born yet. She was always hiding in that cave before she was born, and when they all died, time was a flat circle. They were all trapped in it. Danvers didn't want to hear any more nonsense, so she went back to her room to sleep. During the night, Danvers dreamed of her dead son calling her. She tried to turn on the light but found that the power was cut. Danvers took a flashlight and went outside to see Navarro standing in the middle of a snowstorm. Clark and his colleagues were frozen into ice statues. Danvers angrily asked Navarro why she let Clark go. Navarro knew Clark would do something stupid, but why didn't she stop him? Wasn't she the one who cut power? Navarro said she didn't cut it. Clark was their only witness. They would freeze to death like him. There must be a generator in the room. They tried and tried, but couldn't get it to start. Just then, she heard Annie calling her name again. She followed the sound to the lab. I don't know how long it took, but the snowstorm finally ended. However, a sentence from Clark made Danvers suddenly think of something. Clark had said that he kept the door of the compartment closed because he was afraid that someone outside wanted to open it. Danvers hurried to the laboratory and took out a bottle of white liquid from the cabinet. Then she poured it all on the door of the compartment. Under the ultraviolet light, a handprint with only 3 fingers appeared. Danvers remembered that the daughter of the cleaner at the research station only had 3 fingers. Only then did the two realize that they had asked the wrong question before. The problem was not who killed Annie, but who knew the identity of the murderer. The two immediately went to the cleaner's house. It turned out that they had always known that those scientists had killed Annie. For the past 6 years, she had always thought that it was the people in the mine and the townspeople who wanted Annie to keep quiet. But one day when she was cleaning at the research station, she accidentally knocked over the cleaning bucket and discovered the secret of the research station. She climbed down the ladder to the underground lab and found the drill. She realized that Annie's killers were these scientists. She didn't call the police because they didn't trust them at all. So she took her people to the research station and decided to avenge Annie. Clark escaped to the underground lab to escape. The other scientists were taken by the women into a van. They went to a place near the research station and forced them to take off all their clothes. Then, they used a pen to draw a spiral on the forehead of a scientist. Finally, they pushed these scientists into the freezing snowstorm. They were frozen to ice. The tank cleaner said it was just a story. She asks Navarro how he plans to handle this. It's just a story. They're just here to inform everyone. The coroner's report is in. Cause of death is avalanche. Case officially closed. However, Navarro still has one thing on his mind. Who put Annie's tongue in the research station? But the cleaners have absolutely no idea what Navarro is talking about. End of story. Peter dumped Hank's body in the freezing sea. Danvers hid the truth from his superiors, and before Clark died, he recorded evidence of Silver Sky's pollution. He apologized for his actions. That's the end of the movie. Thank you, and see you again.